Why, yes, it is showtime. And that show is Unfound Live for May 11th of 2026. Hope everyone is doing well out there in Unfound Land. I have a fantastic, spectacular, stupendous, excellent, awesome show planned for all of you tonight. Worked hard on it today. I had no show when I woke up today, but now a show exists. And took me a little while to put it all together, but here we are. And we're going to go through everything, as I always say, in the title for the live shows. Whatever is in the title, that is guaranteed to be covered during the show over the next 2 hours. And then I always come, of course, with other stuff just to make sure we don't have dead air at the end. And those three topics are the disappearance that I will be analyzing tonight. And it's a fairly new one. In these disappearances that I randomly pick to take a look at on what I've been doing for almost a year now, usually are older in nature, maybe 10 years old, 15, 20, maybe going back much further than that. But with Nicholas Downey, it's much more recent. And coincidentally, it is a Florida disappearance. So I'm going to take a look at his disappearance. I don't think there's a lot of necessarily mystery the way we usually think of that word. But I do think that it's a disappearance that, you can learn a lot from it. And it keeps us very honest when it comes to analyzing such things. Also, within the past week, there has been a federal government UFO dump of information. I can't pass that up. And then also, there was a story about a missing person, a dead missing person, being found in somebody else's grave. So, of course, I can't pass up that story either. And so I'm going to take a look at that. So all three of those topics, subjects will be completed before we get to 11 p.m. Eastern tonight. And like I said, I have some other things that I surely want to cover as well. While you are watching tonight or just listening, whatever you've been doing, if you're like in a car driving somewhere, don't look at your phone screen. That would be a bad idea. Even if you have it, I just put a new cell phone holder in my Mustang, and it's the magnetic kind. So I put a magnetic thing inside the case here. And the holder's magnetic, so it's not, there's no clips or anything like that. And I could just almost kind of throw the phone at the holder and it sticks. So I have that set up in my car. I did not have that in my previous one, the Hyundai. And, it's very easy for me to just kind of set that up. And if I was going on a long drive somewhere, just set that up. Who knows? Turn on Netflix or Amazon Prime or YouTube or whatever. Probably a bad idea. But so don't be doing that. If you are in your car and you have a magnetic holder of some type or whatever, don't do that. But as you are listening tonight, you can support Unfound in a variety of ways. You can go to patreon.com/Unfound podcast. You can go to paypal.me Unfound podcast. As you are watching tonight, you can hit the super chat button below and support what we do here that way. And then also, if you are watching on YouTube tonight, you can hit the join button below and become a supporter, get some things that other people do not get. So a variety of ways. And then I also urge you, the new overlay for all of Unfound's videos is the, as it says there, do you need help? missingpersonsconsulting.com. That is my new venture, working at that. So you can check that out. Let's see who's in here. Seems like people are streaming in here a little slow tonight. Totally fine. Who knows what's going on out there in YouTube land across the United States and elsewhere. Hello, Charlie. Got the boys tonight, I see. All right. Well, that's fine, Charlie. I understand. Hello, LaFord. Hello, Serenity. Lisa, what's going on with you? Good to see you. You almost forgot it was Monday. How can anybody forget it was Monday? Monday is like the most memorable day of the week, right? Especially if you're in those 9-to-5 workday jobs. Of course, I work 7 days a week. And in fact, both on Friday and Saturday night, I was emailing former guests of Unfound. The work never stops here. I have very little, but a very little small social life. And so on Saturday night, I was emailing former guests, as I am finally, if you can believe this, doing this for almost 10 years, I have never put together an email list for all of Unfound's guests, if you can believe it. So I am going through almost 400 guests, and many of them I already have their emails from, of course, all the correspondence I had with them, primarily when they were going to be up here on Unfound. But there are actually many I don't have their emails because I communicated with them mostly either through texting over our phones or through Messenger. But so now I'm going through the whole list and reaching out to these people, and it's quite a few. Probably 20% of the people I don't have their email addresses. Like I said, mainly because we just communicated through phone and through Facebook Messenger. But I thought it was important to get all their emails because that's the best way if I want to send all of them. And I've wanted to do this in the past. And it's like, well, I don't have this list, and I have to do this and I have to do that, and never get around to it. Finally gotten around to putting this email list together. So if I need to send all of them something, some announcement or whatever, maybe just some tips on missing persons cases, anything like that, I will put them into one file on MailChimp, the account I have there, and I can send all of them an email, and it will be exclusive to them. It won't go to any of the audience or anybody else. It'll just be directed at them. Should have done this years ago. Actually, what we should have done is started doing this in day one back in 2016, but hindsight 2020. So I was spending a lot of time, like I said, even on those times when many of you maybe are going out, partying it up, or at least not doing any work, just chilling at home with your family, significant others, friends, watching whatever, on your Fridays and Saturday nights, you can almost guarantee that I'm doing podcast work. Not trying to guilt you. So there's that. But speaking of otherwise, what has gone on since we all got together last Monday night? Well, Had a pretty decent trivia week. My team over at Finley's, that would be the Wednesday team, we did pretty good. Came in second. Really moved up the rankings. We had a good night, and what really helped us was that we got the final question right when a lot of teams did not. And that moved us quite a bit up the season rankings. And if you don't know, seasons are 3 months. So, for example, beginning of January through the end of March, beginning of April through the end of June. And so we are in the second season of 2026. If you'll remember, for season 1 of this year, we came in 4th, which I thought was pretty good. And right now, we are in, I think, 8th place, but we still got quite a few weeks to go to try to, and we're really not that far out of 5th place. And 5th place is important because that's where you get into the playoffs if you finish in the top 5 like we did last season. So we came in second. And then on Saturday, it was just me and this guy, Dan, who's part of the team on Saturdays. It was just the two of us. And I think we came in like 4th. And really, we just completely blew a couple questions. I think we could have won. I certainly, once again, hindsight 2020, answered a couple questions just a little too quickly, a little too jumping the gun on them. And, it's our fault. And I'm not putting on him. It's certainly on both of us. That I think it would have just paused for like 30 seconds and said, wait a minute. I think we had a chance of winning. And of course, most of the teams were bigger than ours. So for two people to come in 4th isn't so bad. But Dan's a very, very smart guy, very knowledgeable, very well-read. Me too. The tough part for me and Dan is a lot of our most knowledgeable subjects kind of fall in the same topics. He might be a little more knowledgeable on like video game stuff or cartoon stuff, which is a category. And I'm probably a little more knowledgeable on maybe some history things, maybe some like pop culture stuff like music and movies and things like that. But a lot of stuff, kind of in our same expertise, so that, you like to kind of have people kind of spread out over a bunch of topics. So when you have two people, it can be a little tough. But we still came in 4th. It was a good time on Saturday evening. And then I went right back to doing my podcast work. Trivia usually goes from like 7 to 9 o'clock on Saturday evenings. And then I went actually came home and spent the night here doing work. I told you, I'm a very committed guy, single guy, bachelor, no social life. So trivia this past week, pretty good. Regarding my condo, things just continue to fall apart in this condo. So since last Monday, the realtor who found me this condo 7 years ago, I noticed that my shower is most likely leaking. And the shower, which is right back there, the main shower, I have 2 showers for the guest bedrooms over there. That one's fine. It never gets used. But the one over here that I use, just kind of noticed that it's tile and then the grout in between. I noticed that down on the floor outside of the shower, it seemed like the grout was getting very powdery, and some of it was actually ending up on the floor of the bathroom. I was like, well, that doesn't look good. And so somebody came in, and it's pretty much been decided that, yes, after all these years, the shower finally, and you have to remember, this building is 40 years old. It very well may be that's the original tile in the shower from 1986. It's very, very possible. So you have to look at it in those terms. And so after 40 years, this isn't one of those like things that's very popular now, like with a plastic shell or something. This is just tile. And it seems like it has finally, after all of these years, worked its way through, no fault of mine. So she came over, and then she sent an expert over and looked at it. And I think I'm going to be getting a totally, totally, totally new shower. The whole encasing and whatever they're going to have to do to fix it. Because as you would imagine, the last thing you want in a building with floors are water leaks. And I can see, and for example, before I ever moved in here, I can see where there have been water leaks above me that made it down to my floor. I'm on the 8th floor. It goes up to the 20th floor. There's no floor 13, of course, for bad luck reasons, superstition reasons. That's true. There is no floor 13 in this building. But for example, I don't know if you can really see it on the camera, but right there to the left, like right in there, you can tell, like where I'm pointing, where my finger is right here, you can tell at some point there was a leak, and that part right in there is discolored. Well, what happened was, I think the hot water heater, all the hot water heaters in a row, and the one where that's where it is, would be for the next floor. I think it was leaking, so we had a water leak there at one time. So water leaks, if they happen, whether it has to do with a hot water heater, a clothes washer, your dishwasher, you really got to get on those really, really fast, or else. And in fact, they tell you if you're going to be washing clothes or washing dishes, you're not supposed to leave your condo. Those things you can't just, I'm just going to turn on the dishwasher and leave. They recommend you not do that. That's how important it is. So probably within the next couple weeks, I'm going to be getting a totally new shower. And then on top of that, if you can believe it, my dishwasher died again. Now, when I moved in here, beginning of May of 2019, that dishwasher lasted until August of, I keep records of all this stuff because I'm like that. Was good until August of 2023. It died. Brought in a new one in August of 2023. It only lasted until July of 2025. So just last year, got in a new one. This one died this past weekend. Can you believe that? Not even a year old. And I use it, but I don't use it a lot. I try to, of course, I'm just here by myself. I try to not wash dishes, like put one dish in there and run the dishwasher. I put dishes in there and wait till it gets pretty full before I run it. So, it takes a little while, maybe once a week, maybe once every 2 weeks or something. It hasn't even been used that much. Died. Just it'll try to come on, but no water will come into it. It sounds like the same problem as the last dishwasher where there's a float issue. And it's the same model, so maybe I shouldn't be surprised. So I got a bad shower that's going to get replaced. And I guess I'm going to get a new dishwasher that's not even a year old. I'm guessing there's some sort of warranty that the owner will be able to get another one for free. I'm certainly hoping that. But things are breaking down. Anything connected to water is kind of like going weird here in my condo for whatever reason. Lisa, are those 14 people actually on floor 13? I don't think they can skip that one. Well, yeah. It's not like there's an empty floor there, Lisa. Yeah, it goes from 12 to 14. 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. So whether there's people on 14 or nobody wants to live on 14 because it's actually 13, I have no idea. Zero idea. I can tell you for sure I've never been on the 14th floor in this building. Been on the 20th floor. I've gone up and checked out the view out up there, but that's about it. What am I doing? Lisa, my sister has hard water and goes through dishwasher every 2 years. Well, I don't know. I mean, I'd be really surprised if people were going through dishwashers every 2 years in this building. I'd be really, really surprised on that. LaFord says we had a 13th floor in the high rise. I hate up in. I'm guessing grew up in. Okay, you had a 13. All right, so whoever built that one, not superstitious, I guess, LaFord. But yeah, maybe I should take a picture of the elevator buttons just so everybody can see that. So certainly people are going to be in here within the next couple weeks. And obviously the owner of this condo is going to have to, it's probably maybe get a dishwasher for free, but the shower, it was probably due anyway. And then before I get into the true crime part of the show tonight, last Thursday, can't believe it's already Tuesday or Monday. Where do the days go? Last Thursday, I went to see the Iron Maiden documentary. It came out limited release here in the United States at particular theaters, mainly in urban areas in the United States. Myself and my buddy Dana, another huge Iron Maiden fan, went to see it at the Regal Cinemas in Pinellas Park, and it was fantastic. It was really, really good. I would only say the only complaint I would have is that the audio was not done like a movie is, with surround sound or THX or whatever else, it's like all around you. That was really the only disappointing part. And actually, somebody actually mentioned that on the way out. Now, admittedly, I didn't go there for the music. It's a documentary how they got started and stories and things. And it had, of course, had concert clips, many things that I'd never seen before. And that's all interesting, but it really wasn't there for the sound. I wanted to hear them being interviewed, and you got interviews going way back years and years ago. That's what I find interesting. If I want, I can listen to Iron Maiden anytime I want. But it really, really was good. It's only going to be out there for a few weeks. If you are an Iron Maiden fan, it's only playing like in urban areas like here in Tampa or Miami, of course, New York, LA, Houston, wherever, in the big city areas, and only for a couple weeks. So if you are in one of those areas, I would go check it out. It was really good. Practically everybody, there weren't a lot of people in the theater, but almost everybody in the theater was wearing an Iron Maiden shirt. My buddy Dana wore his Aces High Iron Maiden shirt. I have like 15 of them, and I ended up wearing the Book of Souls album, which came out in 2015. I ended up wearing that shirt. And the reason I picked that one is I wanted to pick one that I didn't think most anybody else would be wearing. Like the one my buddy Dana wore, the Aces High shirt, very common one, even though I don't have one of those. Like Somewhere in Time, that's very common. Pieces of Mind shirt, very common in some others. The Killers shirt, fairly common. But Book of Souls, not as common. So that's the one I wore, and nobody else was wearing one. So I felt pretty good in my selection because, like I said, I have like 15 of them. And if I could afford to buy more, I would. So there's that. But it was really good. And it's so weird. Dana and I were getting into after we went saw. Was it after? Yeah. Getting into how I even became an Iron Maiden fan. And the funny thing is, I didn't even become an Iron Maiden fan until it was like, I don't know, after I was 40 years old. Is that weird? It's kind of weird. Never paid attention to them when in the 80s when they were the biggest. When all, Number of the Beast and 2 Minutes to Midnight and Power Slave and when all that music came out, Run to the Hills, Wasted Years, never paid attention to them at all. In fact, there was a guy when I went to Grove City College. His name was Mike Martin, who I knew pretty well, and he was a huge Iron Maiden fan, had the posters, had the shirts and everything, and I was like, what is this? And now, what would that be? 30 years, some years later, I'm that guy. Really weird. So I can't explain it. There's no explaining it. But there you go. That's what's been mainly gone on with me. The car is fantastic. I'm fantastic. Woke up at 168 pounds today. Feeling good, sleeping well, eating healthy. Even had a little bit of a chance to get out and get a couple rays of sun out there, so I'm not pasty white, even though I am pasty white in my face. I keep the sun off my face, but going out there, soaking up the rays for a little bit has been good for the soul. So all good here on the personal front. All right, let's get to the true crime part of the show tonight. And I want to start here. And I, of course, publicized this last Wednesday. And I hope you all have gone and listened to it. In fact, you should be, no matter if I'm mentioned or not, you certainly should be, it should be a weekly routine for you to be listening to the Consult podcast with host Julia Cowley and, of course, her co-host. They're all former FBI profilers and the great work that they do over there. That is a podcast. It comes out every Wednesday, and that is something you really should be listening to it. I realize maybe not every episode is going to be right up your alley, but it should at least be one where you're at least checking in every Wednesday. Maybe you subscribe to it or whatever, but you should at least be checking in every week to see what they're covering there. And, I hold Julia and the rest of our co-hosts in very high regard. I'm bringing it up this week because her guest was, hello, Dee. How are you tonight? Good to see you. Her guest was two-time guest of Unfound's Tad Tobias, the Nobody Guy. And the interview happened because Julia ended up interviewing Tad, if I may say so myself, because after Tad was on Unfound, of course, he'd already appeared way, way, way back at the beginning of 2017. And I wanted to have him come on. Again, Fishing saying, hey, I had all this mess trying to get on your channel. I don't know what that's all about. Fishing, what seems to be the problem? You will have to tell me about that. Not sure how to explain that, Fishing. I do realize that things are maybe not regular numbers tonight, Fishing, but I don't know what to tell you regarding that. Hey, Ed, all this mess trying to get on your channel is terrible. What is getting in the way, Fishing? I have no idea. When streaming is to a profile, viewer comments won't show up unless stream is public on Facebook. By default, it's friends only. Hello, Eric. Yeah, you too. I don't know what that's about. Fishing, you're going to have to post something there, or of course you can email me at unfoundpodcast@gmail.com to explain what the mess was. Maybe there's a problem with YouTube tonight. It seems to be streaming fine, so maybe it's just an overall YouTube issue. Can't explain it. Anyway, after Tad was on the show at the beginning of February of this year, I was like, man, he'd make a great guest for Julia's podcast. Of course, he's a federal prosecutor. She's a retired FBI agent. I was like, that sounds like a fantastic mix to me. And so I asked Julia if she knew Tad, and it turns out at one time they had run across each other years ago. I think maybe well before the Consult podcast ever started. And somehow, of course, she's working in, the Justice Department. He's working in the Justice Department. I don't know how that happened. But if you listen to the episode from last Wednesday, I think they get into that a little bit. And so they kind of knew of each other. And so I was like, Julia, you really got to have Tad on your podcast. And Tad, I was like, Tad, you really got to go on the Consult. It's hosted by retired FBI agents. That just sounds like a great idea. So once again, this was not the first time they knew about each other, but I was like, I emailed them both at the same time, including them in the same email. And I was like, man, you two got to get together. You guys got to do a Consult podcast for sure. And it happened. And it came out this past Wednesday. I cannot even explain how excited I was for that to happen, to be able to, facilitate that. That's something that I really enjoy, saying, hey, I know this person and I know this person. These two people really got to get to know each other, not like, for relationships, but when it comes to true crime stuff, disappearance stuff, that stuff, I was like, these two people, they have to meet somehow. And I've done that a few times over the past, 10 years. And I was so excited that they ended up contacting each other, and Tad showed up, and it was a fantastic show. And yes, I even got mentioned a couple times, which was, of course, pretty cool as well. But really, it was just, it was just the coolness of Tad, two people who I respect them so much, and I know, you, of course, some of you listen to Julia's podcast, and of course she was on Unfound. You've kind of gotten to know her as part of, you don't personally know her, but know her on her podcast, along with, once again, the co-host. And then, of course, Tad's appeared twice. He was just on, and I know everybody really enjoyed hearing him, his standpoint, looking at no-body cases or disappearances and everything. And, just hearing those two good people, professional law enforcement people, talking back and forth, was just so very, very neat to me. And I was listening while I was in the gym last Wednesday, and that was one of the more pleasurable times. I like going to the gym, but when you can go down and you have something really neat to listen to, it always makes it that much better. So if you've not yet listened to it, you must do that. Whether iTunes, Spotify, wherever. It's last Wednesday, so the May 6th episode of the Consult. I think it's like an hour and a half long, something like that. And so it's really good. Now, but you should know, on a personal note, being that I did get mentioned a couple times, and I really appreciate me even getting mentioned in their discussion. If my friends could see me now, you know, there would have been a time a fairly while ago. Of course, I've been doing Unfound for 10 years, but let's just say 20 years ago, or maybe going back to, let's just say my days at Star Trek, early 2000s. Of course, that's over 20 years ago when I was in my 30s. if somebody from the future would have said, hey, told everybody, hey, 20 some years from now, there's going to be an FBI agent hosting a show, and she's going to be interviewing a U.S. attorney, and Ed gets mentioned. There would be only one way that people would have thought that I would ever have gotten mentioned for something like included in something like that. It would probably be something bad. And so 20 some years later, and I'm being mentioned in a positive light, is certainly something. It's just kind of funny. It's so wild. Of course, going way back, of course, when I went to college, the internet didn't exist, although I did send my first email ever while I was in college, and that was like the most bizarre thing ever. But, if you would have told me in college there was going to be this technology way, way, way down the road, and it was going to be on this thing called the internet that goes all over the world, and then there was going to be an FBI agent who's interviewing a U.S. attorney, and I get mentioned, I'd be like, oh, man, I must have gotten into some trouble. But so that did also cross my mind as I was going through this, as I was listening last Wednesday. So it was so good. It was so good. And of course, I've never met either of them in person. Both of them are going to be at Crime Con. If you're going, maybe you'll run into them before I ever meet them. But maybe during my interview with Tad, maybe we did say Tad does come down to this area of Florida maybe once a year or something. So he and I have talked about meeting sometime. And Julia lives nowhere near me. So, one of these days, maybe somewhere, she and I will get to meet. But it was cool. So check it out, please. I've been talking about it for like 10 minutes now. Please check that out. Of course, Tad goes through his, his resume and everything. But once again, you just get, somebody different interviewing him. And they trade some stories and things like that. Of course, things that I can't offer as an interviewer because I don't have any law enforcement experience. So check it out. The Consult. What else? Another Unfound topic that I want to bring up is, of course, this past Friday, Heather Grotman, and I continue to praise Heather because she brings to Unfound these very unique disappearances. Some of the most unique disappearances that have been featured on Unfound have come from Heather. Not all of them. Certainly Flight 370, that's, of course, Jeff Wise. And you can, of course, when we, the Colonial Parkway murders, of course, Keith Call and Sandra Haley, kind of unique. Heather wasn't involved in that. But when you think about Dale Kerstetter, Kenneth Plaisted, Chance and Dub Wackerhagen, of course, father and son who went missing, and there's an unsolved murder connected to their disappearances. And now we have Rex Douglas. She has certainly put her work and real thought into bringing us disappearances that we might not have covered otherwise, and really have given us something to ponder on those. And so we had Rex Douglas, this guy who most likely, almost certainly, was not who he said he was. And that didn't come out until he went missing. Doesn't seem if he was in the military, wasn't in the military under the name Rex Douglas. If he went to Vanderbilt, didn't go under Rex Douglas. And being that we did the think tank last night, of course, that's connected to Patreon. If you want to be a part of the think tank, That is patreon.com/unfound podcast. Sign up at the premium level. It was amazing to me. One of the topics that was covered was, did you think that Rex Douglas was an escaped convict? And you might even see the comments on YouTube here regarding, when I posted that there, that some people have expressed that there. And more people than I would have thought suspected that this was a guy who maybe at one point had been in jail, escaped somehow, and then, decided to become this pastor, and then he could move around. Of course, he got married and was a pastor for over 20 years. And then, of course, he went missing in 1984. A lot of people really bought into that. In fact, one commenter even said maybe he was DB Cooper. Of course, that caper didn't happen. I think, what was the year? 1971. Could Rex Douglas have been DB Cooper? And then somebody else posted, could he have been one of the guys who escaped Alcatraz? Of course, that happened in 1962, June of 1962. And Rex Douglas and his wife got married in August. I don't think the timeline works out. I think that they had known each other for a little bit longer than a month before they got married. But somebody put forth that idea that, he could have been one of the guys who escaped Alcatraz. I'm inclined to believe that all three of those guys died, trying to, get to land. It seems unlikely to me that they made it, especially since they were not accomplished swimmers, and the water would have, who knows what, they're fighting the current and whatever else. I think it's very unlikely they made it to land. Of course, there's a movie about that. But more people than I would have thought think that he was some sort of escaped convict. That doesn't mean he was a murderer or violent or anything necessarily, but he was in jail, escaped, and then he became Rex Douglas, Mr. Personality, pastor, and everything else. The reason I lean the other direction is, he was a pastor of these different churches for all these years. There are no allegations. Of course, when you're a pastor, especially when you have the smaller congregations, smaller Christian denominations and things, you're much more hands-on than if you were a Catholic priest, let's say. And there were no allegations of fraud, no allegations of money disappearing. It does seem to me that the Douglases lived within their means, modestly. And so would a convict, even if the guy was in jail, not even for some sort of money crime, would a convict be able to get out and keep his nose clean like that and everything? Not to, to be the complete cynic. But it just seems doubtful to me. Maybe I could believe that, somebody like that might be able to keep his nose clean for a year or something, but for 20 some years, it just seems unlikely. Whereas, being that Rockford's in here now, Rockford, who's part of the think tank, he and I were more along the idea of some sort of drifter, maybe an orphan or something like that, kind of just rolling from town to town. And I even, kind of put it in the idea of, like, if you've ever seen the musical, The Music Man, of course, that guy was a con man. But he came into town, River City, and was going to rip the town off and making all these promises. And of course, they were all lies and everything. But then he falls in love. That's what The Music Man's about. And, could this have been the same way with Rex Douglas, where he rolled into town as a drifter, maybe at some point had read the Bible, studied the Bible, and, was a good talker or whatever, and convinced some people that he had pastoral experience or something. And he figured, I'm just going to do this for a little while, and then I'm just going to roll out of town again. But then, of course, he met the woman who eventually became his wife. And he was like, wow, I think I'm going to stay here. I'm going to tough this out for a while. And that's what he did. Now, what exactly happened in 1984, if we're inclined to believe that he left his life voluntarily, it does seem like that's what happened, but maybe it was foul play. But I'm inclined to think that it was by choice. What could have happened? Hard to say. It doesn't seem like anybody was on his heels. It doesn't seem the world was closing in on him or anything. Nobody came around after he went missing asking about him, maybe with a different name or anything. It wasn't like Robert Hoagland, who, left his family, and then 10 years later when he died, there was paperwork and everything showing that he was really Robert Hoagland. So, maybe just this was his version of a divorce. A lot of people can be married for some 20 some years and get divorced. Of course, that's very common now. Maybe he just didn't want to be married anymore. Could have been something like that. And it does seem that before he went missing, he did get some things in order that he and his wife had done while he was still around and they were married. That it doesn't sound like he ripped her off or anything. So certainly hurt her emotionally, certainly bad. But I would not. Let's put it this way. I hold Mary Jane Van Gilder in much lower regard. I hold Kenneth Playstead, that's another Heather Grotman disappearance. I hold him in much lower regard because he was ripping somebody off. Whereas Rex Douglas certainly hurt his wife if he voluntarily left. But other than that, I'm not going to get too crazy about, who he was and being too hard on him. Rockford, I cheat on Unfound with very few other podcasts, but Julia's is one such. Heather is terrific too, and a great source of League of Their Own cases. She certainly is the League of Their Own. That is certainly true, Rockford. D, you should come over and join me and Ed on Thursday nights. Rockford, yeah, you should, Rockford. That's a good invitation. Come join us when I appear on D Show on Thursday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern. Where right now, for at least the last month, we've been looking at disappearances similar to Nancy Guthrie's abduction. Yeah, don't be, so thank you, D. And then, D, I appreciate the invitation. So much difficulty is that during my workday, as I'm on Pacific time. Yeah, that would be 5 p.m. out there in Pacific time. That's true, Rockford. So that's the disappearance of Rex Douglas. I think this, I realize, he might not have been his real name, and he might have voluntarily disappeared, and now his disappearance is 42 years old, yada, yada, yada. I still don't think this is one of the hardest to solve disappearances that have been featured on Unfound. In fact, I don't think it's even close. I still think that let's put it this way. If Rex Douglas continued to live for many years, of course he was here now. If he were alive now, if they were even close to his age, the right age back then, he would be over 100 years old. So the odds of being live aren't very good. Although I just did see somebody on the elevator a couple days ago in this building. She told me her mother is 105. So there's that. But if he continued to live, let's say for another 25 years after he disappeared in 1984, I think there is a decent chance that this could still be resolved. Whereas if he died the next year, let's say that he found out he had cancer and that's the reason he disappeared, then it's going to be a lot tougher. But just generally, I don't find his disappearance to be It has much more, it's much more likely to be solved than many of Unfound's other disappearances, even though it might not be perceived that way. Of course, due to it being sold, etc. Going back to what Fishing said, commercials for one. I don't know anything about that, Fishing. I've really tried to keep the commercials to a minimum here, especially. So I don't know what to say about getting in here with the I don't know. Certainly, in my opinion, YouTube has gotten crazy with the commercials, even for the channels that I go to. But I can assure you that a lot of that is out of my hands. So I don't know. Hello, Jen. What's going on? Good evening. Good evening. Good evening to you, Jen. What's going on? All right, let's get to some of the other topics for tonight. And I should, being that I just mentioned her a few minutes ago, because this is something that Dee and I have been doing on Dee's channel for, like I said, at least a month, looking at disappearances that may appear to be similar to Nancy Guthrie's abduction. You know, you see these little stories out there, and the big story right now is there's some retired detective who's saying, he's determined that given the evidence, Nancy Guthrie made her last stand, quote unquote, right out there, like on the front porch of, her house. First of all, there's no way anybody could know that. Especially somebody who's just out in the public. Somebody, yeah, he may be a retired detective, but surely he does not have any inside information on any of this. This is just stuff to get headlines. Okay, just people spouting stuff off. They don't know. This is just simply for clicks and shares and everything else that so many media sites, this is what they do. They'll just get somebody to say something. And unfortunately, there are just too many people who are more than willing to step up and say anything. I don't know what that means by a last stand. If this person is saying, well, there was a lot of blood there, well, was there? Are we really to believe that, I realize there might have been some blood, but like I said, as I've explained before, she was in her 80s. She was most likely on some sort of blood thinning medication, as most 80-year-olds are. That's not unusual. And I've explained, like with my dad, that, you take that Coumadin or whatever it's called, and that thins your blood out. You know what it also does? It also thins your skin out, and you are very, very, very susceptible to bleeding. Any brushing up against something, a dog scratches you, and of course, because of blood thinners, it also means you're going to bleed for a while. All it would have taken is this guy grabbing her by the arm and twisting her arm, and that would be enough to break an older person's skin, causing it to bleed. Yeah, of course, the guy shouldn't have been there in the first place. But it's not unusual to think that him getting out of here, he had to grab her by the arm. It does not mean that he broke her arm. It does not mean that he stabbed her. It does not mean that he hit her over the head or anything. We have to keep in mind how old she was and probably the medication she was on. So blood doesn't necessarily mean anything. We know that she got abducted. Nobody argues that. But as far as last stand, that would mean there was like a bunch of blood on the, well, or what did he do? I mean, she's bleeding like that means she can't walk. What did he do? Carry her, and she's bleeding all over. I mean, really? I guess there's no, I guess it physically could have happened. And I understand she probably tried to fight back, but Last Stand seems to be sensationalism and hyperbole to me. To me. Do not listen to these people. And of course, the big problem I have, and this is one of the reasons that I try to get things right. This is why sometimes I think some of you, man, Ed really comes up with these boring theories. Well, yeah, because I'm trying to be right. And most of the time, when it comes to the resolutions of these disappearances, it's pretty straightforward. And it's not thrilling to some people. Why do people so badly want to be thrilled by some really quirky, unusual resolution, whether to a murder or disappearance, whatever, art heist, whatever? I like getting things right. And if that means that I think that the resolution is somewhat quirky, yeah, but I'm not looking for that. I'm not going in the direction of being quirky. I want to be right. That's why I, like to play trivia where there's only one answer. These people are not worried about being right. And in fact, the problem is that with all the news media out there, no matter what channel you're watching, whether it's national or local, they get these people on there making declarations, and these people get things wrong. They never have to pay. They keep getting invited back. And so there's no motivation for them to be right. This is what you get, and it sucks. Like I said, I'll say it over and over. The media in the United States, everything, all sides of everything, it all sucks. So, including what I've read over the past week, once again, about Nancy Guthrie and all these people making these proclamations. They just can't help themselves. And then the sheriff saying, we're getting closer. Well, are we? I guess, just theoretically. I'm reminded of, what was that scene in the first Incredibles movie where the parents, she's mad at him and, he says something, well, I told you I'd be back or something like that. Well, I knew you'd be back if you came back at all. Of course, I expected you to come back. It was that you didn't, he didn't come back or whatever it was in what I thought was going to be a reasonable amount of time. So when the sheriff says, well, we're getting closer to a resolution. Well, yeah, simply because time is passing. Yeah, simply because time is passing. And of course, we all hope that it's solved. We want it solved tonight, tomorrow at the latest. So when he says we're getting closer, well, yeah, if a resolution happens, yeah, I guess we are getting closer. But that doesn't mean it's going to happen tomorrow. It might be 100 years from now. So getting closer really doesn't mean much. That's what they've said about the Missy Beavers murder. That's what they said, all these shows they do on the Zodiac Killer on the History Channel. We've uncovered the special piece of the puzzle. Still unsolved. JFK, this is it. No, it's not. It's really disgusting. Jen says, I can't live without YouTube Premium. I'm a millennial. I am done with commercials. All right, Jen. The millennials have spoken. Good for you, Jen. Rockford, the longer this goes, I guess regarding Nancy, the more likely it seems that we have a one-off kook as a perp. Also, the longer it goes, the more kooks emerge with sensational theories. Yeah, this is a hotbed for kookery, Rockford. And that's, I've been saying that maybe not since February, because when was this? This happened beginning of February, late January. I've been saying this probably since March, that this, to me, is some sort of unique type of motivation. That doesn't mean it's a unique individual, but whatever motivated this guy to show up at there 2 something in the morning is not your standard fare. It very well could be, the whatever the first kernel was might not be that unusual, but the motivation actually to do this, to take it this far, is certainly unique. I will stand by that. And what do I mean? Well, just so to go over this again, what do I mean by that? I've put out the idea, could this be that Nancy Guthrie was having problems with a neighbor of hers, and then the son of that neighbor or something like that didn't like what was going on, and the guy was a little off his rocker anyway and wanted to fix it, something like that. So what I'm saying is, in that example would be, neighbors not getting along is not unusual. We've all had neighbors that we've not liked. Even living in this condo building for the last 7 years, I've had some issues. But how many of those end up in people being abducted? Hardly any. How many of them end up in murders? Certainly some, but when you consider how many millions, if not billions, of neighbor problems that have existed over time, the murder rate regarding those is very, 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 very low. The abduction rate is very, 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 very low. But this is what I mean. It very well may be what the instigation is something pretty common, but then somebody takes it somewhere that usually it doesn't go. Where it doesn't go. This is where I am. This is where I will continue to be, other than just saying, well, it's just some kook who saw her on TV and said Nancy Guthrie, Satan, and I have to go take her. Then we get into tinfoil areas. Hello, the cake. What's going on with you tonight? Good to see you. So that's Nancy Guthrie. Let's get to, what is it? Grave hiding. What do I mean by that? Well, the reason I have to talk about this is that, of course, I hear, of course, maybe you've heard maybe on other podcasts or on Web Sleuths or Reddit or wherever, all these unique ideas about how, if the disappearance is a murder, how the missing people get disposed of. And of course, we hear about hogs, we hear about wood chippers, things like that. What about hiding a missing person who's been murdered in a grave? How about that? And in fact, this was kind of a Columbo episode, but that episode had to do with cremation. It was like the newer Columbo episodes that kind of started in the late 80s. Rue McClanahan, or whatever her name was in that episode. Sally Kirkland was in that episode, to name just a couple. Maybe some of you remember that episode. But leave my wood chipper out of it, Ed. All right, D, I'll try to do that. But there was one where a woman went missing, and the bad guy, played by Patrick McGoohan, who was in several episodes, directed several episodes of Columbo. And if you really don't know who he is, he was the star of the British show The Prisoner back in the 1960s. But more famously, he played the very, very nasty king in Braveheart. That's Patrick McGoohan. But anyway, here's the story about a missing person being hidden in a grave. A tip in the search for missing man Keith Palumbo led investigators to a cemetery crypt and a gruesome discovery inside. The haunting case of the 36-year-old Delaware County, Pennsylvania musician and tattoo artist who was murdered by his longtime friend is now the focus of Oxygen's true crime series, Philly Homicide, where retired detective Chris McMullen revisits some of the city's most explosive crimes. This is a very sad case, McMullen said. Through a very thorough investigation involving interviews with other parties that either had knowledge or some type of involvement, it led them to Mount Moriah Cemetery. And honestly, it was not that surprising to me because I know that a lot of stolen cars have been dumped there. I even say in the episode, if you wanted to hide a body, that's probably a good place to do it. Because nobody, the whoever was taking care of the cemetery went out of business or whatever else. But in April 2020, investigators unearthed not only Palumbo's body, but also the remains of David Russillo Jr., 33, a prospective member of the Warlocks Motorcycle Club. Both victims were found in the family vault of Captain A.H. Cain, C-A-I-N, who died in 1884, not 1984, 1884. Russillo's killings was a separate incident. Those remains were discovered in the same crypt. So I guess they murdered Russillo, put him in the crypt, and then this Palumbo guy got murdered by this motorcycle club, and then they put him in this crypt too. McMullen said the Mount Moriah Cemetery had fallen into disrepair for years and was largely abandoned. And always remember that, is where you're going to be buried if you're going to get buried. Make sure that the cemetery seems like it's going to be around for a while. Or, if you're going to do it out in some country cemetery, in some little town that maybe has seen its better days, it very well could be that 50, 70, 100 years from now, if your family's buried there, put there, or whatever, it totally gets overrun. Nobody takes care of it and everything else, if you care about such things. I remember up in East Brady, Pennsylvania, my family had a camp out there in the 1980s, and right up the road from where our camp was a cemetery that was completely abandoned. There were headstones and everything going back into the 1800s and everything. Nobody taking care of it. Zero. It was right there along the Allegheny. Our camp was right along the Allegheny River up there. The cemetery is right along the Allegheny River there. So remember that. According to reports, it had become known as a dumping ground for stolen cars and other illegal activity. Mount Moriah Cemetery had gone out of business years ago. I've been there. There was a time when I worked part-time in the funeral business, and I was there. It was something like out of a post-apocalyptic film when you go there. There are headphones that are knocked over and vines growing all over the mausoleums. It's very sad because this was a cemetery where people were laid to rest. Typically, you expected to be cared for perpetually. Yeah, that's too much to expect. And they're also talking about a huge cemetery. So according to the episode, cooperating witnesses ultimately helped police piece together what happened to Palumbo and Russillo Jr. The information combined with physical evidence recovered at the scene and cell phone data allowed investigators to build a case against DeLuca and others. A witness told police that DeLuca said he killed Palumbo and needed help disposing of the body. In 2023, DeMauro was found guilty of first-degree murder and abuse of a corpse in connection to Russillo Jr.'s death. Prosecutors said he shot the 33-year-old, tied a rope around his neck, and dragged his body to the crypt, which had been pried open. Before dumping the remains, he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. So there you go. So the question is this something that I'm going to have to consider when I now look at disappearances? Probably not. Obviously, it happened. And what do I always say when I hear about wood chippers and hogs, feral hogs and things like that? Well, first of all, you have to understand that the wood chipper idea comes from the movie Fargo. And the hog story comes from technically the third, I guess. But the one, was it Hannibal? What is it? Was it just called Hannibal? The Hannibal Lecter movie with Ray Liotta and Julianne Moore, where Julianne Moore, of course, then plays Clarice Starling. That movie also had Gary Oldman in it. And if you're really forgetting it, not to ruin it for everybody, but Ray Liotta is like Clarice Starling's partner, and he's kind of a hothead, and he really wants to get Hannibal Lecter. They're searching for him after Hannibal Lecter got away in the Silence of the Lambs. Once again, not to ruin it for everybody, but that movie is known for the scene in which, and once again, not to be morbid if you haven't seen the movie, but Ray Liotta's character is alive, but Hannibal Lecter is eating his brain, is serving his brain. That's what that movie is known for, if you didn't know. But on that movie, there is a scene with hogs and everything. You just have to remember where these things come from. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that a criminal has never used a wood chipper. All right. I'm sure it has happened. But the amount that I've heard of it over years, you'd have to think that every wood chipper in the United States was used to dispose of a body. And we know that's not the truth. In addition, when it comes to hogs, as much as I've heard about that, you'd think every hog farmer in the United States has had hogs that have killed somebody. We know that's certainly not true. So when it comes to bodies being put in crypts, in burial sites or whatever, yes, I'm certainly open to the idea that this is not the only time this has happened. I'm certainly open to the idea that there are missing people out there who were murdered, and they are also put in somebody else's grave. I just don't know how to make a prediction regarding how often that has happened. My guess is that it's just not very common. We can't, once again, we just can't, because of one-off event or two-off event, get a really good statistical idea of it. We just can't. It may live in people's imaginations. It may be good fodder for topics at 3 a.m. on Reddit. But when you're actually trying to analyze these disappearances and make accurate predictions about whether missing people ran off, were murdered, suicide, accident, if they were murdered, how were they disposed of? I'm thinking at this point, if you're starting to pick being put in somebody else's burial site as a very common choice, I think you're going to end up being wrong most of the time. That's where I am on this. And hello, Mary. How are you? Good to see you, Mary. So, and of course, you should know a couple things. We have at least one disappearance that involved the biker gang, and that was the disappearance of Shannon Turner from Indiana. She was dating a biker gang member, in which there may actually be proof that a wood chipper was used. You should know that. Can't tell you which disappearance that was, or that is. Still unsolved. I have to tell you, I am doubtful, even though the guest has told me and things. I'm still fairly doubtful about that. But it does seem like it's worth a second look. So, if I'm telling you it's worth a second look, then there might be something there. But I'm still thinking something else happened for this particular disappearance. As I could continue to say, as facts change, theories change, I'm open-minded. I'm not going to, sit here and stake out my claim on a particular theory and ride it to the end just because. That's not what I do. I like to be right. I've been wrong, but I like to be right. All right, so that is the grave hiding story. The other thing, of course, I have this UFO dump story. And since we last got together, the federal government has released some pictures and all sorts of things regarding, once again, UFO stuff. And some of those documents have been put out online. And I continue to be unimpressed by all of it. Absolutely 100% all of it. Well, why is that? I'll tell you that I'll a couple different reasons. First of all, when you look at some of these documents, you have to remember how many of them they are so redacted. And what comes to mind is something that I always say about people who seemingly believe in UFOs and think they're flying around and the federal government's covering it up and all of this stuff. And what I would say is this: if anybody truly believed that these were non-humans in spacecrafts or whatever you want to call them, flying around, they have advanced technology, this, that, and the other thing, would this stuff really be redacted? I mean, really, the fate of the human race, it would be the number one most shocking thing in all of human history. Homo sapiens, Homo erectus, Neanderthal man, Cape Peking man, on and on and on and on, the pyramids and everything else. And still, there's some human out there who thinks, yeah, we got to redact this. It just seems a little trivial at that point. Now, we understand when it comes to common crimes like burglaries and other things, and certainly as a person who has filed some FOIAs and gotten them, I know what redacted paperwork looks like. And of course, it's because it's an ongoing investigation and law enforcement is afraid, well, if we say this and this person's name and this number, and these people could get harassed on and on and on and on and on. We know those reasons. But that's, really, that's just a robbery. But truthfully, there's some bureaucrat out there looking at this material and looking at it and seeing the unredacted report and saying, oh my gosh, there are really aliens out there, and then decides, yeah, we got to redact this. It just seems unlikely to me. Once again, we're talking about the fate of everything. It would blow up every idea, for the most part, that people have about why humans are here and everything else and our position in the universe and everything else. And then somebody's just going to get out of black mark and say, yeah, we're just going to wipe that off. It just makes it seem so trivial. Especially when we know that over at least in United States history, how many leakers there have been. And how many of those leaks were proven to be true? For example, when we look at the Pentagon Papers with Daniel Ellsberg, when we look at Watergate, and of course, Deep Throat, who ended up being Mark Felt, who was assistant director of the FBI. He was, if you don't know, the assistant director of the FBI was Bob Woodward's secret source, back for Watergate. We have leakers all over the place, Snowden and all, but when it comes to UFOs, the best we can do is that idiot Bob Lazar, who allegedly worked at Area 51 and was telling all these stories about what he saw here. That's the best we can do. This is, once again, this is the reason I doubt. On top of everything else, the physics of it and everything, this is the reason that I doubt it. We know what real leaking of government documents looks like. We know these people can really show that things are true and everything else. But when it comes to all this, what do we get? We get blurry videos, we get redacted documents and everything else. It just doesn't seem very serious to me. Not to mention, I can't rule out the idea that there are people in the government who might just want people to believe in UFOs to, draw their attention for whatever other stupid thing they're doing that's actually really a real thing and way more important. I can't rule that out either. The whole wag the dog type of thing. And of course, when it comes to actually real things that really humans have invented with our own minds, and yeah, it's better off to think that stuff UFOs when really it's, really actually modern technology. Remember, the SR-71 Blackboard, yeah, that was, secret at one time too. And the technology that it used was thought to be impossible until they did it and flew Mach 3 or whatever it was. Evading radar was the stuff of fantasy until the F-117 came along. The Nighthawk and everything. Not UFOs. So there's that. And on top of that, being that it's amazing to me that so many people believe in UFOs and watch these videos and think they're real and everything, but they still go about their everyday lives as if nothing's going on. If you believe that aliens are here, then it should be reasonable to believe that the extraterrestrials, little ETs or gray men or the Decepticons or whatever else, are going to make themselves revealed to the public at any second now. Being that they have free will, I guess, then it's possible that they could reveal themselves to the human race at any time. There's no way that we would have any control over that. Yet, these people who claim they believe in UFOs, the people are here, the people in the, the little black or the men in black or whatever else, they just go about their lives just like I do, a non-believer. If I really believed in these things, I'd be like, man, that could happen at any time. I better be prepared. I better be emotionally prepared. I better do this. These people don't do any of those things. They still take their kids to soccer games and they still pay their taxes and they still worry about the retirement accounts and they still plan vacations and everything else, even though they seemingly think that ET can reveal itself at any time. It just seems contradictory to me as what I think I know about humans. Mary says I can't handle the whole ET stuff. Me either, Mary. That's why I talk about it. And I think also when it comes to this topic and what people say they've seen in the night sky and everything, it helps if you know a lot about plane crashes and you really start to understand how the human mind can be fooled, especially at night when it comes to lights and objects and everything else. And in fact, you can see those little eye puzzles that pop up on my Facebook feed or on my Instagram feed, and how easily the mind can be deceived even by a simple picture. One of these things like, this picture looks like it's moving, but it's not. These two colors seem like they're different, but they're not. You're seeing an image that really isn't there. They do these pictures of hamburgers that then if you look at it a certain way, it looks like the face of Jesus and things. Our minds can be so easily fooled. Our eyes can be so easily fooled. Cameras can be so easily fooled. So this is where I am. So when it comes to these UFO files dump, and the other thing, of course, on top of everything else, none of this is ever going to please anybody. Never. These people who believe in this stuff, they are never going to be pleased. They're always going to say, it's no different than JFK. I continue to assist, once again, as a guy who shot a few guns in his life. That shot was not that hard. It wasn't that far. I have shot farther than that at the gun range that I go to with my AR-15. With my Colt, 6230 or whatever it is. Not that hard. Not that difficult. Yet people want it to be this and want it to be that, so they have something in there. This is why these books come out every year. There's no new information regarding the assassination of JFK. Zero. But man, it makes good discussion points. It keeps these people talking. It fills up their empty boredom time. Can't handle. Bro Alien disclosure will finally prove one thing. Humanity can turn literally any word-changing event into a computer extinction of every piece of toilet paper on the planet. Okay. All right, Valiant Thor. Valiant Thor has spoken. So that's where I am, Argument I always make. These UFO believers think aliens are here, yet these humans go about their daily lives as if they don't believe. They're concerned about their sports teams, their reality shows. Would not a true believer not take anything else seriously? Would not thinking that aliens could appear to us at any second be more serious than anything else going on this planet? Global warming, the Strait of Hormuz, the next election and everything. Wouldn't that be more important? And yet they get all crazy about all of that stuff. I don't know. That's just my my 2 cents on how I view humanity. So there you go. All right, I got a half hour to go over the analysis of the disappearance of Nicholas Downey, Downey. This is not a disappearance that is on the Charlie Project. It is on NamUs, and there have been some podcasts, including The Vanished, that I think have already covered this his disappearance. I've not listened to any of them. Certainly, I've read quite a bit about his disappearance, and I am going to do my best to analyze it. Like I said, I don't think the mystery is necessarily what happened, as to, what went wrong. But like I said, when at the start of the show tonight, I think this is a good way. This is one of those where it's kind of a touchstone disappearance that you can always refer back to it. So what do I mean? All right, it's not that big a mystery, but it's a good example of why, quote unquote, logic and quote unquote common sense aren't good compasses when you're looking to find a direction in analyzing a disappearance. So I'm going to, as I usually done, done before, I'm going to read an account of the disappearance. Going to probably add in a few things along the way. And then I'm going to ask questions, things to me that are still kind of outstanding, or questions I would ask in a consulting session, like missingpersonsconsulting.com, right there at the bottom of the screen. And then I'm going to do my own analysis of what was really going on, not just that night, but everything in the days before leading up to Nicholas's disappearance. What exactly was going on here? All right. 37-year-old Nicholas Downey was last seen in Bristol, Florida. That's up in the Panhandle of Florida, on February 27th of 2023. So this disappearance is just a little over 3 years old. He disappeared while returning from a trip to visit his wife in Mississippi. So he's actually down in my area of Florida, like Bradenton, this midsection of Florida, not way down there in the Miami, not way down there in the Keys, not over in Jacksonville, kind of in this western area of mid-Florida where I live. But his wife was in Mississippi. I'll get to that. Nicholas Downey was born January 1st, New Year's Day baby, of 1986. And so he's 37 years old. And at the time of his disappearance, he was working in Bradenton and shared a rental home in Gulfport, Mississippi with his wife. We'll come back to that. He has a 16-year-old son and a 13-year-old daughter who live with their mother in Kentucky. So it seems that he was on his second marriage, and that his two kids were from another woman, and they lived in Kentucky. All right. In late February of 2023, Nicholas Downey took a week off from his job in Bradenton, Florida, to visit his wife, Holly, who was staying at a rehabilitation center in Mississippi. Now, it's very important for you to understand this was not a physical rehabilitation center. My understanding is that this was either some sort of mental illness or some addiction that she had. Nicholas rented a Tesla car in Tampa, of course, where I live, through the Turo app for the 4-day trip. So if you don't know what Turo is, Turo, this is a site where you can actually rent other people's vehicles. So it's like Airbnb. So instead of like Airbnb, you stay at a hotel. There's somebody who has a part of their house they've turned into an apartment, or they have an empty house, or some cottage or something like that. And I've used that many times. Airbnb when I've gone on my disc golf trips. I really like it because you can really stay in some really unique places. But Turo is the same thing. People can rent out their vehicles. And in fact, if you ever instead of going to Hertz or whatever else, people, if they have an extra car or something, you can rent their car. And you should know, if you've ever wanted to maybe drive a really, really, really luxurious vehicle like a Rolls Royce or a Corvette or something like that, if you ever wanted to drive one for a day, that's the cheapest way to do it, through Turo, Turo. So Nicholas gets this Tesla, and through the Turo app, some guy in the Tampa area, and in fact, his name might be in here, and he's going to take this trip up to Mississippi because he's working down here to see her. On the night of February 26th, 2023, Downey was on his way back from visiting his wife when he pulled off I-10. So this is the I-10, of course, runs all the whole way across the United States, coast to coast, around the southern part. So I-10 actually goes through Phoenix and ends up going up there to, into the San Diego, LA area, but also goes the whole way across the United States to Jacksonville. So he's on the I-10 going east in the Panhandle. When he pulled off I-10 to recharge, of course, it's a Tesla, so he pulled off to recharge it behind a McDonald's restaurant in Marianna, Florida. I've been there. Security footage shows a single person exiting the vehicle to charge it before pulling onto State Road 71 heading south. So kind of heading south toward like the Gulf, instead of getting back on the interstate. Well, with Turo cars, a lot of them have trackers on them. And so the car owner noticed that the car was not headed back to Tampa, the car's owner, who was watching the car's progress through an app, was alarmed when the car did not get back on the interstate. By the way, I'm reading this from the disappearedblog.com. When it did not get back on the interstate to continue heading back to Tampa as planned. The owner sent a text to Downey, which would have, of course, appeared on the main screen in a Tesla, but received no response. Nicholas was scheduled to return to work on the morning of the 27th, but never arrived. Nick has never been seen or heard from since. On March 3rd, so 4 days later, Nicholas was reported missing from Gulfport, Mississippi. On the morning of February 27th, though, the Tesla was found abandoned by a lease owner in Liberty County, Florida, parked between Turkey Creek Road and Prison Road, in an area known as the Stoke site. Nick was nowhere to be found. The car had little charge left, but was still in working order. The windshield, though, had been damaged, and what had happened was that Nicholas seemingly was driving it, and he went through a gate. The gate was just a chain across the road, like on a dirt road with a chain across it. He blew right through that chain. Of course, the chain hit the windshield and really messed the car up. With white transfer plate from the car being found on the cable about 1.5 miles away from where the car was found. Authorities contacted the person Nick rented the vehicle from, who was able to remotely unlock the vehicle. 2 phones were found inside, as well as a change of clothing and a drone believed to have been used for Nick's job. The 2 phones, one was Nicholas's, one was his wife's. She was not allowed to have her phone at the facility. A search of the area was conducted by the Liberty County Sheriff's Department with the help of canine and aerial units, but no clues as to Nick's whereabouts were found. Liberty County Sheriff Buddy Money said there was hardly any footprints around the car. Something's not adding up. Well, somebody brought the car there. Location of Nicholas Downey, as well as the circumstances surrounding his disappearance, remain unknown. His case is classified as endangered missing and remains unsolved. So some people have made this out. Are we sure this was not a carjacking? I don't think so. Like I said, as going into this is not the biggest mystery to me. But I also said there's a lot we can learn from this, and this is where we get into that. Certainly, there are people trying to make this disappearance out to be more than what it is. And whereas I'm pretty sure, I wouldn't bet my life on it, but pretty clear that something was going on with Nicholas. Well, there is additional info that was not, of course, included in that write-up. The first thing that jumps out to me, once again, as a fact, is that when he went to rent this Tesla, for some reason, Nicholas didn't have his wallet with him, and he actually had to call his mother to get his mother to rent the Tesla for him through the app, the Turo app. Now, this is a guy with a job. He's married. He has kids. He shows up to rent a car without his wallet. Something going on. Now, for me, I have to tell you, if it were me and I had a car on Turo and somebody showed up without a wallet and said, oh, yeah, my mother's going to, and the guy's 37 years old. Oh, my mother's, it would be like, you know what? I don't think I'm doing this. Obviously, this Tesla owner was different. The other thing we have to remember is that it seems that when, of course, the Tesla was located and they got the unlocked and they started going through the car, there was a substance in a little plastic bag in the car, some sort of drug substance, although that substance has never been made public. So there's that, which I could have predicted that. In fact, I predicted that before I even read it. This just sounds to me like some sort of drug, as we would say, drugs play a role, that kind of disappearance. This is definitely a drugs play a role type of disappearance. But having said all that, if I were in a consultation with Nicholas's family or his wife, who my understanding she's now out of rehab, if I were having a consultation with her or them, whoever, these are some of the questions that would be on my mind. Had Nicholas used Turo before? I know a lot about Turo, but I've never used it. Like I said, maybe I will one of these days, if I really, really want to drive a really exotic car. But I have a Mustang now, so, it's kind of one of my dream cars anyway. So I think I'm cool for now. But had he used Turo before? Was it well known that his wife was in rehab? Was this kind of a secret trip? He's kind of trying to make a secret of it. Did everybody know that she was it an open secret? That might be helpful for me to understand everything that was going on here as well. And in addition, how long she had been in rehab. What also sticks out to me is that he's down here in Florida working. She's up there in Gulfport. What was going on there? How long had he been down there? It seems their place of residence was actually in Mississippi. Well, did he travel for work? I would want to know a lot more about that. Once again, just to understand the situation, what was going on here, and try to get to know Nicholas as best I could. Of course, if I'm having a consultation with her, I'd be like, well, what do you have to say about this? Because what you see is, even though this disappearance is over 3 years old, you can't find many statements from the wife regarding what was going on with Nicholas. Nobody denies that he went to see her. He did go see her. Well, what did they talk about? Things like that usually wives are prone to talk about if their husband goes missing. Well, this is the last conversation I had with him. We don't have anything like that. Had he ever gone on any trips to see his wife before that? Once again, going back, did he use Turo? Did he use his own car? Did he borrow a friend's car? Did he fly? Did he ever go up to see her? And of course, if we knew how long she had been in rehab, that might help us out. Of course, this was just for second week being there, then I'm guessing he had not gone to see her. But if she had been in rehab for months, then I think it's more likely that he had visited her, and I'd want to know about that. How long had this trip been planned in advance? Now, it seems that he rented the Tesla on the very day that he left, whereas this renting a car on Turo is no different than renting a car with a regular corporation, or renting a hotel room or whatever. You can reserve them days, if not months, in advance. Whereas it seems he rented it the day he left, of course, needing his mother's help. But still, how long was this trip planned? Has the wife ever, as something going on with her, ever admitted that Nicholas might have also had a problem? And I also know, well, what did Nicholas's friends have to say about all this? And really, you can't find anything. Now maybe in those podcasts or whatever that have covered this, maybe they reached out to some of his friends, and these friends said some things, but in what we would call the regular media sites, nothing. I went to Web Sleuths, nothing. Now, there's at least one additional thing that you should know. It does seem that Nicholas, there is a story out there that he was not the best guy. And there's a story that he might have ripped people off. He had a business and he got paid and didn't do the work. There is what that business's name is, how long ago this was, and how much money it was. Not sure, but that story is out there that, maybe he started a business and got in over his head and couldn't pay his creditors, or like what we have here in Pinellas County, where people claim they're in the pool fixing business, like swimming pools, like backyard pools, and they take the money up front and never show up. Very common, if you don't know, here in Pinellas County. Hard to find good pool builders in this county. At least that's my perception of reading of all this news stories. So maybe Nicholas might have done something like that, although not necessarily regarding swimming pools. So I think we have to keep that in mind as well. So as he swindled, I guess we might say swindled some people. So here's the first thing that pops out to me that seems, once again, other than him going to rent the vehicle and doesn't even have a wallet. Did he really not have his wallet? Did he pretend not to have his wallet? What did he forget it back in Bradenton? Who knows? I don't know. All the story is that he showed up to rent this vehicle and didn't have a credit card or didn't have his wallet. I guess he ended up driving the whole way to Mississippi without his wallet or something. Either that or he didn't want the person to know he was. I don't know. It may be something trivial. It may be meaning something. But here's the thing that sticks out to me. Now, you should know I'm not the biggest fan of electric cars. They make pollution too. But here's what I know. It is a really, 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 really odd choice that he knew he was going to. I think they said that the distance was like 660 miles. Why would you ever rent a Tesla for that? The max range on this vehicle was 220 miles. Whereas, if you might remember, the Sonata that I just got rid of, that I just sold a few weeks ago, that I had for almost 9 years, it got 38 miles to the gallon. I could almost drive from here to Gulfport on one tank of gas. Whereas on a Tesla, you'd drive 200 and some miles, pull over and get a charge. We know to charge these things takes a little time. Drive another 200 miles, charge it again, drive another 200 miles, and you may not be even to Gulfport yet. Who would make that kind of decision? And you should also know, when it comes to Turo, Teslas are not the cheapest cars to rent. Of course, Teslas in some, can be considered luxury vehicles. Like I said, I'm not the biggest Tesla fan. It has nothing to do with Elon Musk. Just not a fan of them. It just doesn't seem like a very good choice, but that's what he did. Now, why would somebody do that? I think I have a reason. And I think it does go to Nicholas's disappearance. Well, what is that? Well, what are Teslas known for? Even though they aren't known for having the greatest range, what are they known for? Having the best self-driving system, right? Really, I know every manufacturer has them now, but Tesla's, I think, especially 3 years ago, really, really, really known for that. Well, that would be the perfect car to rent if you have a drug issue. Because I think the way that works, you have to touch the steering wheel every so many seconds. Isn't that how that works? You just can't lie back or something. I think you have to touch the steering wheel or do something every so many seconds. That's a pretty good setup for somebody who might want to be doing things behind the wheel that they shouldn't be doing. I think that's the reason he rented a Tesla. Because otherwise, It's like the worst choice in the world. I mean, my Mustang, of course, is gas, doesn't get the greatest gas mileage. The car I just got, it gets like on the highway about 27 miles to the gallon. It would be cheaper or whatever for me to get here to Gulfport than it would be in a Tesla, and I'd still get there a lot quicker. He's going to see his wife. You'd think he'd want to get there fast. No, he gets a Tesla, or he's going to have to pull over 3 times to get a charge. It seems like an odd choice, unless you want that self-driving function for certain reasons. It's telling that there's nothing out there from his wife saying anything. And it's also telling to me, remember, that night, he kept going, he kept going the wrong direction, even after a message showed up in the car saying, hey, man, where are you going? He still chose to do that. And once again, if you're in, the land of, well, that doesn't make any sense, we have to attach some logic to it, you're going to be lost. Once again, these things where people end up going the wrong directions and wreck or whatever else, they don't have to make sense. If you're trying to live within that envelope, a lot of times you're going to be wrong. Whereas the odds tell me that, yes, Nicholas was going up to see his wife. I'm not saying he didn't care about his wife. I'm not saying he didn't love his wife. He did go up there. But it's also obvious to me that Nicholas had some sort of addiction problem, and I predicted that even before I found out that there was some sort of substance found in the vehicle. What seemingly happened is that he picked a car in which all they'd have to do is sit there, touch the steering wheel, every few seconds, and he could, let's just admit it, get high while riding up there. And all they have to do is pull over once in a while, charge up the car, wouldn't have to be around gasoline or anything, and he could do whatever. And he got up there, saw his wife, and came back, and that worked until it didn't. And what happened is, I'm predicting probably what happened is that if he were high, he might have misprogrammed the Waze or whatever else, and it took him off on that road, of course, because he doesn't know what he's doing because he's high. He's off on the wrong road, doesn't realize it. The car is he's not driving. The car is driving itself, because that's what Teslas do. And he ends up on this dirt road, blows through that gate, and I think at that time he knew. And suddenly, of course, he's still high, but he sobers up a little bit to say, oh my gosh, what did I do? Because it's going to get out. He's damaged the car. They're going to, if he sticks around, if he pulls over, stops the car, and the police show up, they're going to see that he was drinking and driving. They're going to know he was doing this in the car and he shouldn't have been doing it. On and on and on and on. It's probably something that he's been covering up for a long time. And my guess, it might be some sort of opioid addiction. I'm not saying it necessarily had to be illegal drugs, but I could see a doctor shopping type of situation. You have to remember something. We all have to remember this. A lot of functioning addicts out there. We have to remember that. A lot of people getting, even if they are illegal drugs, getting high on legal drugs, and family helping them out, friends helping them out. They're still going to work. They're still going to their sons and daughters' soccer games and baseball games and everything. But they are functioning addicts. They're still dangerous. And my best guess is that very well could be that Nicholas Downey is still alive. There's nothing that I see here to think that he's deceased. But considering that he might have had an addiction problem, considering there might have been creditors, if he ripped people off, he has every reason in the world after something like this happens to want to get out and go somewhere. And I have to be honest about this. Given that his family hasn't said much, could it be that they maybe even know where he is? Once again, as you know, I have a lot of experience dealing with families and how they react to disappearances and how they go to the media and what they say and everything. I would not say that the people around Nicholas Downey have acted like most of my guests have. So I'm even open to that. Once again, just a theory, my insight. But at the very least, I think this is a situation where Nick knew that he had to go see his wife, but he wasn't going to let his other activities get in the way of that. Now, why, if she was in, I don't know what the rehab was, but if she's in drug rehab, why didn't he go? I don't know. But it's pretty clear to me this was some sort of drug-induced disappearance. I don't think he intended to get off on that wrong road. I don't think he intended to drive through that gate, whether he was driving or the car was driving or whatever else. But this is what happens when you do stuff. In fact, Jason Landry, I'm open to the same thing. I think when he was driving home that night, he had stuff on his brain. That's why he missed the turn and got off on that dirt road and wrecked and everything. It's kind of the same thing. So Nicholas Downey, like I said, I haven't listened to any of those podcasts. Maybe some of you have. Maybe you have your own insights. If so, you can put it down in the comments for this live show once it becomes a video on the YouTube channel. So Nicholas Downey, like I said, maybe it will be a disappearance. Eventually gets featured on Unfound, but this is a disappearance. I think I have a pretty good handle on it. But I think it all starts with why a guy who's going to be making a 650-mile trip, he could have picked a very efficient like Honda Civic or something. He picked a Tesla with a 220-mile range. That should all tell us something. All right, this Friday, we start the Atlantic series, and it will start with an interview with my assistant, Eric, who has done most of the work on this. We're going to kind of just lay the groundwork for what you will be hearing in the coming weeks. We will be featuring at least 3 separate disappearance incidents over the course of this series. And I'm still hoping to interview, I made this promise that, a Coast Guard investigator was going to appear. Unfortunately, now I'm not so sure about that. But we're still trying. But certainly, you're going to hear about all these disappearances that happened off the coast of the Atlantic coast of Florida during the 1980s. You're going to hear from the sisters of one of the missing people. You're going to hear from the sister of a missing man. And you're going to hear from the daughter of a missing guy. And I'm still working on contacting some other families who've lost people. So it very well could go beyond just these 3 or 4 or 5 weeks that I'm planning, depending on how many people I continue to reach. But I'm just calling this the Atlantic series. These are all disappearances that happened off the Atlantic coast of Florida during the 1980s. So right now, 1981, 1984, and 1986 are all going to be represented. Hopefully, I will have more. So you're going to be hearing a lot of different interviews here. So there you go. That starts this Friday. Be looking for it. I don't know what kind of special logo or design. I haven't worked on that yet. Probably be something that I'll cook up. But that is it for the May 11th live show of 2026. Thank you all for showing up tonight Don't know what to tell you. If some of you had a problem logging in or getting, I don't know what to tell you about that. If you had a problem, email me at unfoundpodcast@gmail.com. Not sure what I can do about it. Charlie, obviously your sons are with you tonight, so I'm happy to hear that. And say hi to them for me. And hello, not going to mention their names. Hello, nephews. And keep your heads on swivels out there. Do not end up being on my podcast. Good night.